Welcome to Celine Science for Everyone. My name is Roger, I'm a scientist living in Montreal, and at least once a week we try to talk about science that may interest you. Today I'm going to talk about scientific reproducibility. Why? It's because a paper in elife has appeared in which they have analyzed 193 experiments. They have tried to repeat these experiments and see if they could reproduce it. But let's review a little bit. What does it mean, reproduce an experiment? Let's review a little bit more. How scientific results are shared with the community? Well, scientific results are shared with what's called a scientific article, aka a paper. The scientific articles have several parts. You have a title, you have an abstract that is a short description of the paper. You have an introduction where you describe the state of the field. Then you show your results, and there is a discussion. So where is the future? What's the projection of these results? And there is also a really important part on a paper that's called materials and methods. Which reagents have you used and how have you done experiments? In the materials and methods, you should describe exactly how the experiment has been done in order for another lab to reproduce your data. So in this project that I was talking about, the Reproducibility Project for cancer biology, what they have tried to do is to replicate 193 experiments from 53 papers that they were highly cited as really important papers in cancer biology between 2010 and 2012. So what I'm going to do in this video is discuss which are the results of this project, which are the consequences, the implications, and I will give you also my personal view. Okay, let's analyze some of the numbers of this project. First, 193 experiments were designed. 87 of these were initiated and only 50 were completed. Let's analyze now the barriers that the project faced. As we can see on this graph, a lot of clarifications were needed in most of the experiments that they tried to repeat. And the helpfulness of the authors vary a lot. Sidebar. A clarification in this case means that the scientist reproducing the experiment needed to contact the original scientist that performed the experiment for the first time. 1/3 of the experiments received no help from the original authors, either because they didn't want to give any advice or because directly they weren't responsive. On the other hand, 40% of the experiments, the original authors were extremely helpful. I would say that this data is a little bit surprising because we have to keep in mind that when we scientists publish a paper, so we are supposed to share with anyone that asks us how we did the experiment, and if there is any reagent that cannot be purchased because it's homemade, we are supposed to share it. Let's talk about the modifications that the experiments require in order to be reproduced. We see that few experiments did not require any modifications. Most of them require some modification in different degrees. And what is surprising is that some experiments, they require extreme modifications to be done compared to what was published originally. What's the time scale that we are talking about when we are trying to reproduce an experiment? So the average time that it requires to reproduce an experiment from the design to the replication of the study, it's close to 200 weeks. This is a lot of time. This tells us that we should be more careful with the experiments that we do. Because if anyone tried to reproduce the experiment and we have not explained the design properly or we have not shared all the information required to do the experiment, somebody is going to lose a lot of time. And time is also a lot of money. Surprisingly, only 2% of the raw data was publicly accessible, was open access. This is really important in order to reproduce the findings, compute the effect sizes. So if you have different amount of animals or count different number of cells, and also to perform a statistic analysis. That is really surprising, taking into account that some funding agencies promote the use of open access journals where we have to submit all the original data obtained during our experiments. Science is done as a community. In fact, the science of today is based on what was done in the past, and the future will be based on what we do today. So if we want a strong science in the future, we need to start sharing data openly, sharing the protocols, sharing resources. Only if we go together, we will advance to somewhere.